Hey everybody, welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. I am already completely fired up to talk to our next guest, Allison Carmen, and we're talking about her book, The Gift of Maybe. And I'm just so fired up to talk about this because I am a gigantic worrier, and I didn't realize how much I worry, but I realized that there's so much more to life if I didn't worry as much. So if you kind of feel the same way, please listen up because we're going to get some really, 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 really great information on the gift of maybe. So welcome, Allison.
Oh, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
You know what's so weird? I just love like coincidences. I was telling my husband about the gift of maybe, and I said, it's a lot like the Taoist belief of don't know. When is this going to happen? When is it? When is dinner going to be ready? Don't know. When will you know when dinner is going to be ready? Don't know. When will you know when you know dinner's ready? Don't know. And he's like, you know what though? That reminds me of the story. And he retold the story that you said in the beginning of the book. And I thought, oh, I love it. Okay, so I wanted you to share that story with us, the story that got you fired up about the gift of maybe.
Okay. Well, I'll give you a little bit of backstory before I heard the
Sure,
story.
yeah, absolutely.
I always say that I was addicted to certainty. If I didn't
Hmm.
know what was going to happen next in my life, I projected things were going to be bad or things weren't going to work out. And I think a lot of us do this. We're so worried that life's not working out. We want to know. We're fearing if we don't know, things are bad. And so what we do in life is that we write these stories about what needs to happen for us to be okay. We could
Mm.
say that we need to have this job till we retire, or our child needs to go to a particular college to be okay, or we need to meet this particular person so we'll feel loved. And what we do is we hold these stories really close to our heart, believing that this is what needs to happen, and if it happens, we will be fine. But
Hmm.
life always has the unexpected. And when
Hmm.
something unexpected happens, you lose your job, your child doesn't get into that college you expected them to, you don't meet that person, we start to spin out of control. And even though intellectually we know life has more than one lane, emotionally we don't recognize this. So in my life,
Hmm.
I was totally addicted to certainty. And the big story that I wrote in my life that was I was going to become an attorney. I was going to get a job at a really large law firm. I was going to make a ton of money. I was going to marry this great guy, and the balloons were going to come down, and I would have no more certainty in my life. I really honestly believe that.
Yeah.
And I did. I pursued all those things. I married the great guy. I got the great job. And I remember walking to work my first day feeling like, oh, I've arrived. No more uncertainty. I am
Hmm.
set. Life is awesome. And the second day of work, my office mate comes in and says, Hey, Allison, do you hear they're firing half the first years? And I was a first year.
I
And
know.
it was very difficult because I had based so much on this story that all of a
Hmm.
sudden I realized that it's always going to be uncertain. And I had a new degree of anxiety because once I had that realization, I stopped sleeping. I started to worry. What if they don't like my memo? What's going to happen
Oh,
if I
wow.
can't pay my rent? If there's going to be another terrorist attack in New York City? So I was really spinning out and I
Mm.
stopped sleeping and I started to run to all these doctors hoping that somebody would alleviate my suffering. And
Right.
they did all this blood work and they're like, Allison, there's nothing wrong with you, but here's this little pill for anxiety and everything will be fine. And even that made me anxious. And I just kept spinning and spinning until one day I heard the story that you just brought up. And it was a story about this farmer. And this farmer had a horse, and the horse ran away. And his neighbor came by and said, You have the best luck. The worst luck,
Worst
excuse me.
luck.
And
Yeah.
the farmer said, Maybe. And the next day, the horse came back with five mares. And the neighbor came by and said, You have the best luck. And the farmer said, Maybe. And the next day, the farmer's son is on the horse. He falls off and breaks his leg. And the neighbor comes by and says, You have the worst luck. And the farmer says, Maybe. But then the next day, the army comes to take the son to war, and they can't take him because his leg is broken. And the neighbor comes by and says, You have the best luck. And the farmer says, Maybe. And in the Taoist tradition, the story means things are neither good or bad, they just change. But for
Hmm.
me, I had a different experience. The minute I heard this story, I actually felt a pop in my chest. And for the first time in my life, I was filled with hope and possibility. Because all of a
Mm.
sudden I started to see that, yeah, the horse could run away, but he could also come back. Life, the uncertainty has hope. Uncertainty has possibility. Maybe things are what I'm experiencing is good. Maybe it'll get better. Maybe I'll be okay no matter what. So I went home that day and I started to play with this idea. And I had already left the law and I was on my own. I was doing some business consulting and I was worried about losing this client. And all of a sudden I was like, well, maybe it's okay if I lose this client. Or maybe I won't lose this client. or maybe something else will happen, or maybe there's a lesson to learn. And all of a sudden, I realized that my stress and worry, it was slowly going
Mm,
away, and all of a sudden, I was really present, and I realized that I can live life from a larger perspective. There's always more happening. We get so stuck, we feel so doomed because we think there's only one lane. But maybe reminds me all the time there's more, there's more, there's more. And
mm.
I just unhook from the fear and I land in this open space. And it doesn't mean I'm not going to still have that worry, but I'm recognizing there's more than that, just one worry.
Ah, okay. That's
There's
one of the things I was going to ask you because, because you said, well, maybe I'll get the client, maybe I won't get the client, and
right,
in some ways, you increase the possibilities of things that
right,
could happen with your question, maybe. But any of those, you didn't prevent any of those maybes from happening or not happening. One of the questions that I have is, okay, so when you said, well, maybe I'll get the client, maybe I won't. So, or maybe I can't remember, maybe I'll continue with this client, maybe I
right.
won't. When that happened, did you stop planning for the potential worst case as well, or did you?
Right.
You know what I mean? Does maybe alleviate any desire to do anything to prevent the worst case? How does that work in your
But what
life?
happens is that we have desires, we have goals, and
Right.
there's nothing wrong with the goals. Where we get messed up is that we get stressed and worried when things don't happen exactly as we planned.
Right.
So what maybe does it helps you recognize that life has twists and turns. So let's say you were starting a business
Mm-hmm.
and like people come to me all the time, I'm going to start this business, I'm going to make $100,000 this year and I'm going to have 30 clients.
Right.
But what happens if at the end of the year you have 10 clients and you made $50,000? Well,
Right.
without this idea of maybe you could start to say life's not working out, things aren't working out as planned, my business is never going to grow. No, what's happening is that something else happened. And just because something else happened doesn't mean you're not still going to be successful. And maybe remind you of that. Maybe you need to change your marketing plan. Maybe you need to invest differently. Maybe you need to just say maybe everything's okay exactly as it is, and I'm just growing my business. So what it does, it unhooks you from the story you're telling about what's happening. But you could still, and then you can make a plan for year two. And it's not that you shouldn't say, oh, this year I want to make $200,000. It's I'm going to be flexible and fluid because I realize the unexpected is going to
Right,
happen.
and it doesn't alleviate or prevent you from planning or thinking
No,
about planning or planning for the worst case so that you're protected. It's just opening up the realm of possibility so that you are suffering less. Because in that example, right, if I'm actually thinking about all these opportunities, I'm also if I'm actually opening up and suffering less because I'm not expecting just the worst case
right,
scenario, which is what I think
right,
most of us do.
right,
Most of us worriers,
yeah,
which I'm a worrier, we think of the
right,
worst case. So I'm like the inveterate planner. I'm constantly planning. And in order to plan, I have to look for protecting against the worst case and hoping for the best case. And I
right,
don't even know if that's, you talk about in your book, you talk about linear thinking and then you talk about negative twists, I think is what you call it.
right.
Tell us what those things are and how those kind of things sneak into our lives.
Okay. Well, it's interesting. I just want to go back to the fact when you say that I'm planning for the worst. It's a really interesting place to be. First of all, when you plan for the worst, there's always a level of suffering and dread because no one wants the worst to happen.
Right.
So people come to me like, well, if I plan for the worst and I can accept that now, then I won't be as upset when it could possibly happen. But
Right.
we don't realize that we're planning out of fear. We're living in fear because we
Right.
don't really want to plan our business based on the worst because we're not really going to get the best result.
Hmm.
So, yes, the worst case scenario, yes, that can happen, but maybe something else will happen too. And there's a better place to plan from. When you're living in maybe, you're living in a larger perspective and you're not operating on fear.
Hmm.
And that's where we get messed up. When we operate in fear, we don't make our best decisions. When we operate on fear, we might end up creating our worst case scenario.
Hmm.
So maybe it kind of allows us to let go of the fear and then connect to our wisdom. When you are making decisions, you're using your mind, you're losing your experience, but you're also using your wisdom, you're going to end up in a different place than you are operating from your fear. So I think it's a different approach to life when you're using maybe. It's not that you're denying that the worst can happen, but you're also recognizing the best could happen too. And something in between could happen, or something to the left, something to the right. All these different things could happen in life. So when you're making decisions, you're living in a larger perspective, you're more hopeful, you're going to end up with a better result. And most importantly, you're going to suffer less. And for me, this whole idea of maybe is about me living with less suffering.
Okay, so let's go back to the scenario of someone actually had the goal of making $100,000 and they made 50,000 in their first
Right,
business, which you said is pretty typical, and I think that that is
right,
typical. So in that particular case, it's coming to, it's coming rolling. December is rolling in, and I'm thinking I'm at 50,000. It doesn't look like I'm gonna get to 100,000 at the end of the year, but I actually have expenses that I have due that were contingent upon making that 100,000. And so, is there a chance that because I wasn't in a place of fear or worry, that had I really started thinking about it 6 months before, I would have prevented that from getting 100,000. I guess that's what you call regret or looking back. But
Yeah.
I mean, do you
Well,
understand where this is the dilemma that I have with this maybe
yeah, no,
idea?
no, I totally understand. What happens is that we think that if we're not planning for the worst and we're living in maybe, we become fools. But we
Yes.
don't. It's not like in let's say February, you're not going to look back and say, hey, I expected to make 100 and I've only brought in $10,000. It's not like you're going to not look at your expenses. Of course you are. But what you're going to do is, again, you're not looking at it from fear. Sometimes people have to close their businesses down. And interestingly, if you're not in maybe, sometimes you end up staying in business longer because you're so afraid, if I close the doors, I'm never going to make a living again. I'm never going to be able to open another business. So all that happens is that when we're not in maybe, we're living in fear. And we're in maybe, we're not in fear. When you're not in fear, you're going to see things for what they are. But at the same time, you're going to look at things in a fluid way, in a flexible way. You're going to be more open to make better decisions. And you're also going to be hopeful. You're not going to become a fool. You're actually going to be operating more from your wisdom. And I know some people who need to control everything have trouble kind of understanding that concept. But there's so much pain in planning for the worst. There's so much pain in saying things aren't working out. So with maybe, you're just opening up, you're on a larger playing field, and there's more likely you're going to manifest. But again, sometimes you do have to close the door. But you'll know, and you won't be afraid if you close the door, because you'll realize that life has maybe, and the next day you could start a new business, you can get a new job, there'll be more opportunities. So without the fear, you're going to be making better decisions in your life. And
Okay.
that's what he does. Live life without fear.
Okay, so let's say that I was living life in the place of love versus fear, and I was like, my business is going great. I don't know really. It's November, it's December, and I'm looking at it's November, and by the end of December, it doesn't look like I'm gonna get $100,000, and I may have to fire a person or whatever. I don't know. So let's say that I'm in November, and I didn't go through I wasn't living in fear then, and I'm being present through,
Okay.
January all the way up to November. I'm being present and being in this maybe space. Then what happens in November when you go, gosh, I'm not going to make it in December to 100,000? I mean, maybe some great thing is going to happen. Maybe, I mean, how would you coach me if I was working with
Okay.
you saying, oh God, what do
Okay.
I do?
So here we are at November, and
Yep.
we're going to be looking at your numbers. We're not going to ignore the balance sheet. We're not going to
Okay.
ignore the profit and loss. We're going to be looking and say, okay, you're going to know it's time to make a decision. The number, it hasn't come in, but it doesn't. You're not feeling doomed. See,
Right.
that's the thing. What happens is you go, oh, it's so horrible. I didn't make the numbers. Things aren't working out. No, all that's happening is you need to just shift your position without all the drama, without all the pain. It's time to let someone go. That's just how it is. And maybe I'll be able to hire somebody back in February. It's not that you're not going to make the good solid decision. It's that you're not going to, you're going to make this good solid decision, but you're also not going to be writing the story of doom and gloom. You're going to realize, I have to make a decision, and life still has maybe. Things can change again. So maybe I'll be able to hire somebody back in March. Maybe I'll make more money next year. Maybe I need to shift things. Again, it's about, without the pain, without the fear, you're going to
Okay.
in the moment what you need to do.
Okay, so I'm a financial planner. I'm like, well, why couldn't you figure that out in September? If you look at your run, okay, I'm being a devil's
No,
advocate
no,
mostly
this is
because
great.
this is what people are probably doing, right? Okay, in September, I'm looking at October, November, and December, and I'm looking at my current projections based on my current run rate, and I'm saying probably not going to get 100,000 because I'm now at 40,000. I don't think I'm going to make it by the end of the to 100,000 at the end of the quarter. So there's kind of a time horizon. Like, when do you say, okay, let's look at the numbers. It's now November. You're not going to make December, so let's start looking at the financials and figuring that out. Or would you do that all the way in September, or would you do that in mid
Okay.
year? I mean, you
I'm
know what I
always
mean?
looking. I have to tell you something. I have a legal background, accounting background. I'm always looking at the numbers.
Okay.
I recognize that, yeah, maybe I will get another client. Maybe I'll get 30 more clients. But in this moment, this is what I see, and I'm going to make my decision based on today. But again, I'm not writing the fact that I'm stuck. I'm not doomed. I'm not stressed. I'm not worried. I'm just taking care of business. And I realize that within uncertainty, things could change, things could get better. So I'm having a different experience. I'm making solid business decisions, but at the same time, I'm not suffering. That's what happens. The minute we don't like what's happening, we go into so much pain. We go to this little cramped place in our mind where life's not working out and things will never get better. And I have to tell you, when you're of the mindset things are not going to get better, you're going to make a bad decision. I can almost guarantee it. Yeah. Life will change. And when we make a solid decision today, but with maybe we know within that change, things will keep moving forward and more possibilities will come. But the minute you don't believe in maybe, you're going to shut down. So
I see. Okay, got it.
Open. So you make a solid business decision, but you stay open to hope and possibility at the same time.
Okay, so you would be looking at your financials throughout, but then at one point, like let's say that you're in the September month, looking at October, November, December, going like, I don't know, but you wouldn't go. You would go, well, maybe this will go up. Maybe I actually can go to 100,000. Maybe I won't get to 100,000. Maybe 100,000 is the wrong number. Maybe I don't even need to make 100,000. Right. You know, so you go into all of those kind of things, and then you make a decision, which may be like, or I'm going to cut some of the expenses in October, November, December.
But you're also doing what you're doing is you're putting the maybe down in the decision. Maybe I'll make the money, maybe I won't. But it's really about this larger perspective, saying, it's about life changes and I'm not doomed and maybe everything will work out. Maybe everything will be okay. It's kind of alleviating this overbearing stress and doom that our business isn't working out. So it's not as much about debating because if you're not stressed and if you believe life changes, life has possibility, and you're not in fear, you're going to look down at your numbers and you're going to know what you need to do in this moment. It's the fear that makes us not know. It's the fear that clouds.
Okay.
That's interesting. What's happening is that you're saying, well, I'm going to be in this wish-washy place because I'm in this maybe, but maybe is the bigger picture. It's understanding that uncertainty is our friend. If we want our life to change, it has to happen in the unknown. But in this moment, all we can do is make the decision based on what we're seeing today. But we're not going to have this horrible emotional reaction to letting this person go. We're not saying my business is never going to grow. It's never going to change. You're saying in this moment, I need to let someone go because my expenses are too high. But as life changes, I know there's maybe. I know I'll figure out another way. I know I'll get more clients. I know I'll build my business. So that's where the maybe is helping you. It doesn't leave you in this place where you're kind of like, oh, I don't really know what I should do. It's not like that. It actually allows you to stand on more solid ground because, again, it's not a fear-based decision.
Got it. Okay. That's fascinating. That's a really good example. Thank you. Thank you for walking me through that. Because that's a part, my planner is going like, my spiritual part is like, I want to embrace this fully. Right. I want to be in maybe all the time. Right. And then there was a part of me that goes like, wait a second. Wait, does that mean I don't plan? Does that mean that I don't like react? And that's not it at all. What you're saying is that you're actually reacting, but from a place of love versus reacting from a place of fear.
Right. And you're connecting more to your innate, your knowledge, the wisdom that you've accumulated. What happens is that things in the past, I'm sure you know this, everything from the past is always with us in the moment. But what happens is that without maybe, it's the things we're afraid of that we're always going to be making the same decisions over and over and over again because it's always based on our fear. I didn't get that client last week. I'm not going to get that client today. My business didn't grow last year. My business is not going to grow today. But with maybe you recognize the past is no longer relevant. And all you do then is you just take the wisdom. You take the knowledge. Okay, I know what's happened in the past of my business, and I see, where the trend is going, and I'm going to make my best guess in this moment of what could possibly happen. So it's really, again, I know I've said it a bunch of times, but again, it's letting go of the fear. When you let go of the fear, everything looks different. You can look at two similar situations, one with fear, one without fear, and it's going to look totally different.
Yep, I agree. It's hard. It's not always easy to do. Right. But I know when I actually put myself in a place of fear, it's an automatically contracting place, and my brain is not open to anything. I just kind of, I think what you describe as linear thinking. I just go into one path where I can only see doom, or like a small set of options, all of which are awful. Right. So I just go into there's only one possibility, one thing that's going to happen. Is that what you mean by linear thinking? Or
right, yeah, but it's interesting. This originally, when I found this idea of maybe, I was not going to share it with anybody. It was my private practice, and it wasn't. It was during the 2008 crash when everything changed. I mean, I had a lot of. I wasn't really practicing law anymore. I was doing more business consulting. Right. Every one of my clients they were freaking out because they didn't have the clients they used to have. They couldn't get a loan. They couldn't afford their rent. Things were just out of control. And no matter what I did to try to help my client, let's sit down and look at your marketing. Like, the uncertainty was so overwhelming that they couldn't see straight. So one day I actually shared this idea with one of my clients because I didn't know what else to do. And it was the only thing that helped him, because we have to remember, usually it's our fear of uncertainty that's really slowing us down. It's our fear of the unknown. We forget that things don't look the way we expected them to, and we're projecting we're doomed. Things aren't working out. But with maybe we realize, okay, well, maybe everything's still okay. Maybe I need to call Joan and ask her for help. Maybe I need to do this. It kind of opens us up. We realize, okay, even though things don't look good in the moment, life has maybe. So in this moment, you make your best decision, and then you're not stressed about the future, because you realize just because you don't know doesn't mean it's going to be bad. And that's a game changer, because then you're showing up in the moment with hope and with belief and with an openness. And I truly believe the more open you are, the more possibilities you're going to find, the more opportunities. If you have a client and they're sitting there saying it's never going to work out, I'm never going to find my way, I'm never going to know the client, what kind of decisions are they going to make? It's almost like when you're at the blackjack table and you're losing so much, you throw all your money down because you can't stand it anymore. Right?
Yes,
but
absolutely.
maybe it's kind of like you what I say is that you develop a type of faith over time that you can hang out in the unknown and not be so scared.
Yeah.
And then your intuition is going to kick in, your know-how is going to kick in, and life's going to start to shift. So when these clients, when they started to engage in this idea of maybe, they didn't feel so doomed, they didn't feel so scared. So they're able to sit down and say, okay, I'm grounded enough to be in this moment and make the best decision. And even if I make a wrong decision, I know life has maybe. And even if I make a wrong decision after that, life has maybe. So even if you make a couple of wrong turns, so what? The next moment, the next breath offers you hope and possibility again. And when you know this, you start living differently. You don't live the same way. You don't make the same types of decisions. It is a game changer. And most of all, you suffer less. And again, out of all the gifts maybe has given me, is that I live my life with less suffering when I'm making the decisions, when I'm parenting. Even when I walk outside my house, everything is different, because I see there always is going to be the unexpected. There's always going to be twists and turns, but that's okay, because there's always hope, there's always possibility, and each moment will offer me something new. So that's a mindset that changes how you look at your business, how you look at life, how you look at everything.